Boxing world, George Foreman has passed away at the age of 76. Foreman's family announcing the news via Foreman's Instagram account.
People booed me for years, and it didn't bother me because I booed him, if you ask me. Knock him out too. I mean, I was an angry guy. Then you get a chance to live, that second chance to live.
Boxing legend George Foreman has passed away at the age of 76, leaving behind not just a championship belt, but a legacy as big, bold, and enduring as the man himself. Known to the world as the powerful puncher who could knock out opponents with a single blow, and later as the smiling face behind a world-famous grill, Foreman's life story was one of resilience, reinvention, and redemption. Born in Marshall, Texas, and raised in Houston's rough Fifth Ward, Foreman's journey began under the weight of poverty and hardship. A self-described troubled youth, he found himself on a dangerous path, getting into street fights and running with the wrong crowd. But everything changed when he joined the Job Corps, where he was introduced to boxing, a moment that would alter the course of his life forever. By 1968, Foreman was standing atop the Olympic podium in Mexico City, a gold medal draped around his neck. Just a few years later, in 1973, he shocked the world by demolishing Joe Frazier in just 2 rounds, knocking him down 6 times to claim the heavyweight championship of the world. His fierce power and intimidating presence made him one of the most feared boxers of his era. But George's life wasn't just defined by victories. He suffered a dramatic defeat to Muhammad Ali in the legendary Rumble in the Jungle, and later retired, turning to faith and becoming a preacher. Remarkably, a decade later, he staged an impossible comeback, returning to the ring in his 40s and regaining the heavyweight title at age 45, becoming the oldest champion in boxing history. From championship belts to hamburgers, from knockouts to kitchen counters, George Foreman lived a life few could imagine. And through it all, he never lost his sense of humor, humility, or heart. A fighter, a father, a preacher, and a businessman. George Foreman was larger than life in every way. Before he became a global icon, a heavyweight champion, grill mogul, and beloved public figure, George Edward Foreman was just a tough kid from the wrong side of Houston, Texas. Born on January 10, 1949, and raised in the rough and unforgiving streets of the city's Fifth Ward, Foreman's early years were marked by struggle, poverty, and turbulence. With 7 siblings and little structure in his life, he often found himself in trouble, fighting, skipping school, and falling into petty crime. George was a self-described street brawler, big, angry, and aimless. By his teenage years, he had already earned a reputation as a hot-headed troublemaker, engaging in fights and brushes with the law. He dropped out of school at age 15 and roamed the streets with little purpose, headed down a path that promised little more than hardship or incarceration. But as fate would have it, one opportunity changed everything: the Job Corps. At age 16, Foreman enrolled in the federal Job Corps program, designed to give disadvantaged youth job training and education. Initially skeptical and still carrying that same restless energy, George found a mentor in Doc Broaddus, who saw potential beyond the chaos. Broaddus steered George toward boxing, suggesting that the ring could be a place where he could channel his aggression into discipline, focus, and purpose. It was a turning point that would not only save George's life, but launch him into the global spotlight. Foreman took to boxing quickly, ferociously, in fact. Within a short time, he was turning heads with his raw power and physical dominance. In just a couple of years of training, he had done the unthinkable, earned a spot on the 1968 U.S. Olympic boxing team. At the Mexico City Olympics, a 19-year-old George Foreman stepped onto the international stage and made a thunderous entrance. Fighting in the heavyweight division, he bulldozed through his competition, culminating in a decisive victory over Soviet boxer Ioannis Chapoulis to claim the gold medal. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement. As he waved an American flag in the ring, his face filled with pride, the world saw a glimpse of a new champion in the making. The gold medal transformed George from a street kid with a past into a national hero with a future. Riding the wave of Olympic glory, he turned professional in 1969, and his rise through the ranks was as rapid as it was brutal. He won his first 37 fights, most by knockout, earning a reputation as one of the most feared punchers the sport had ever seen. His size, strength, and ruthless fighting style made him an unstoppable force in the heavyweight division. By the early 1970s, he was tearing through opponents like a man possessed. With each bout, his reputation grew. George Foreman wasn't just a boxer, he was a storm. Analysts described him as a human wrecking ball, a powerhouse who could knock out opponents with a single punch. Fans and fighters alike were in awe of his sheer physicality. There was no finesse, no dancing, just raw, devastating power. In just 4 years after his pro debut, George Foreman was on the cusp of greatness, undefeated, and barreling toward a showdown with reigning heavyweight champion Joe Frazier. But even then, few could predict just how quickly and dramatically Foreman would shake the world of boxing. His story had only just begun. By 1973, George Foreman was an unstoppable force, barreling through the heavyweight division. With a towering 6-foot 4-inch frame, devastating punching power, and an undefeated record, he was the clear contender for the heavyweight crown. But standing in his way was the reigning champion. Smokin' Joe Frazier, an Olympic gold medalist himself, and the man who had famously handed Muhammad Ali his first professional defeat. Their highly anticipated clash took place on January 22, 1973, in Kingston, Jamaica, and it would go down as one of the most one-sided title fights in boxing history. From the opening bell, it was clear that Foreman was not just there to fight. He was there to dominate. Within moments, Foreman's power overwhelmed Frazier. The champion, known for his toughness and relentless pressure, was knocked down 6 times in just 2 brutal rounds. The commentary from Howard Cosell that night became legendary. Down goes Frazier. It was a performance that shocked the boxing world. Joe Frazier, one of the most durable fighters to ever step in the ring, had been dismantled by Foreman in under 6 minutes. The referee stopped the fight at 1:35 of the second round, and George Foreman was crowned the new heavyweight champion of the world. In that moment, he was more than a champion. He was a phenomenon. The display of raw, relentless power was unlike anything the sport had seen since the days of Sonny Liston. Opponents feared him. Analysts called him invincible, and fans saw him as a force of nature rather than just a fighter. George Foreman wasn't flashy or technical. He didn't bob and weave. He bulldozed. He was a wrecking ball in boxing trunks, and now he held the most coveted title in the sport. From a troubled youth in Houston's 5th Ward to the top of the boxing world, Foreman's rise was as quick as it was fearsome, and he looked unbeatable. But as the world would soon see, even the strongest giants have their reckoning. In 1974, George Foreman was the undefeated, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, feared for his sheer power and dominance in the ring. At just 25 years old, he had demolished Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, both of whom had previously beaten Muhammad Ali. So when Foreman agreed to fight Ali in Kinshasa, Zaire, the world expected another quick and brutal finish in Foreman's favor. But what happened on October 30th, 1974, became one of the most iconic moments in sports history. Dubbed the Rumble in the Jungle, The fight drew global attention and millions of viewers. Foreman came out aggressive, swinging heavy shots early, just as he always had. But Ali didn't dance around the ring as expected. Instead, he leaned against the ropes, absorbing punishment while taunting Foreman to throw more. He was ordained as a Christian minister, and over the following years, George Foreman underwent one of the most dramatic reinventions in sports history. He opened the George Foreman Youth and Community Center in Houston, aiming to help troubled kids find a better path, just as he once had. He preached in churches, spoke in schools, and focused on family and faith. Gone was the angry young fighter. In his place stood a smiling, gentle giant, full of warmth, humor, and humility. George Foreman had stepped out of the ring and into the pulpit, proving that true strength isn't just measured by fists, but by the ability to change, to forgive, and to lead. After a decade away from the spotlight, George Foreman shocked the world in 1987 by announcing his return to professional boxing. He was 38 years old, weighed over 260 pounds, and hadn't fought in 10 years. Most people didn't take it seriously. Critics scoffed. Fans were confused. To them, Foreman was no longer the fearsome champion. He was the friendly preacher with a soft smile and a rounder frame. But George had a plan. He said he didn't return for glory, but to raise money for his youth center and to prove that age, faith, and determination could conquer doubt. Slowly and steadily, he began to win fights. And while he wasn't as fast or as fearsome as he had once been, his ring IQ, toughness, and still lethal power made him a true contender. Over the next several years, Foreman kept fighting, racking up wins and building momentum. Yet many still saw him as a novelty, until he climbed back into the ring in 1994, at 45 years old, to fight Michael Moorer, the undefeated heavyweight champion who was 19 years younger and in his physical prime. Few gave Foreman a chance. For 9 rounds, Moorer outboxed him, landing jabs, moving with speed, controlling the pace. But Foreman never panicked. He waited, patient and composed, absorbing the punishment and watching for an opening. Then, in the 10th round, it happened. With a short left to set it up and a crushing right straight to the chin, George Foreman knocked Michael Moorer out cold. The crowd erupted. Foreman calmly walked to his corner and knelt in prayer. He had done the unthinkable, becoming the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history. At 45, he had defied every odd, every critic, and most of all, time itself. His comeback wasn't just a sports story, it was something mythic. It was the triumph of will, faith, and perseverance. Like a real-life superhero, Foreman had shown that it's never too late to chase greatness. Even those who once mocked him now stood in awe. The preacher had become a champion again. And his legacy was no longer just about brute strength. It was about heart, patience, and the power of believing in yourself when no one else does. After reclaiming the heavyweight title in 1994, George Foreman didn't just walk away a 2-time champion. He walked into a second act that would make him a household name all over again, but this time outside the ring. While most boxers fade into obscurity or struggle post-retirement, Foreman became a marketing sensation, thanks to an unlikely kitchen appliance, the George Foreman Grill. Launched in the mid-1990s, the lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine took off like wildfire. At first, it seemed like a gimmick. Why would a former heavyweight champion be selling indoor grills? But it worked. His charm, charisma, and genuine enthusiasm made the product relatable. Unlike other endorsers, George didn't just lend his name, he believed in the product, and people believed in him. The grill became a massive success, selling over 100 million units worldwide. It wasn't just a product, it was a cultural moment. Millions of homes across the globe had a George Foreman grill on the kitchen counter. Families who never watched a round of boxing still knew who George Foreman was. Financially, it was life-changing. At one point, Foreman was making more money from the grill than he ever did from boxing. Estimates suggest he earned over $200 million from the endorsement, making him one of the wealthiest athletes turned entrepreneurs in history. But it wasn't just about money. The grill symbolized Foreman's transformation, from intimidating bruiser to beloved public figure. He became a pop culture icon, appearing in commercials, sitcoms, and even lending his voice to cartoons. Always smiling, always humble, he connected with generations who may have never seen him fight, but admired the man he had become. In a world where second chances are rare, George Foreman made the most of his. And whether it was with gloves or a grill, he proved that greatness can come in many forms. Beyond the boxing ring and the bright lights of fame, George Foreman was, above all else, a man of faith, family, and conviction. While his punches made headlines and his grill built an empire, those closest to him knew him best as a devoted husband, a loving father, and a man guided by spiritual purpose. Foreman was famously the father of 12 children, including 5 sons all named George: George Jr., George III, George IV, George V, and George VI. The reason? He said it was to remind them all of unity and responsibility. If one of us goes up, then we all go up. If one goes down, we all go down. Each child bore the name with pride, and Big George, as he was lovingly known, was deeply involved in their lives, from the boxing gym to the Sunday pews. Faith was the compass that guided Foreman's post-boxing life. After his spiritual awakening in 1977, he became an ordained Christian minister and built the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ in Houston. He also opened the George Foreman Youth and Community Center, a safe haven for at-risk kids, a full-circle moment for a man who once walked the same troubled streets. His mission was simple: to inspire hope, preach forgiveness, and help young people find the second chance he was once given. Even as fame and wealth followed him into retirement, Foreman remained humble, always crediting his success to God's grace and the lessons he learned in failure. In interviews, he often joked and smiled, but behind that warmth was a man who had been broken, rebuilt, and reborn. George Foreman's legacy goes far beyond the titles and knockouts. He was proof that you could fall and rise again, that you could be feared once and loved forever. From fighter to father figure, from champion to preacher, George Foreman lived a life that inspired millions, because in every chapter, he showed us what redemption truly looks like. George Foreman wasn't just a 2-time heavyweight champion, he was a champion of life. From the streets of Houston to Olympic gold, from devastating defeats to miraculous comebacks, he embodied the spirit of perseverance and transformation. He taught us that strength isn't just in the punch, but in the comeback, in the faith to change, and the courage to forgive yourself. He became more than a fighter. He became a father figure, a preacher, a businessman, and an inspiration. Whether he was raising his children, feeding families through his grill, or lifting up youth through his ministry, George Foreman lived with purpose and heart. As we say goodbye to Big George, we remember a man who was knocked down many times in life, but never, ever counted out. His story will live on, not just in boxing history, but in every soul that believes in second chances. Rest in power, champ.